Cossacks are a group of predominantly East Slavic-speaking people who became known as members of democratic, self-governing, semi-military communities, predominantly located in Ukraine and in Russia. They inhabited sparsely populated areas and islands in the lower Dnieper, Don, Terek, and Ural river basins and played an important role in the historical and cultural development of both Russia and Ukraine. The origins of the first Cossacks are disputed, though the 1710 Constitution of Pylyp Orlyk claimed Khazar origin. The traditional post-imperial historiography dates the emergence of Cossacks to the 14th or 15th centuries, when two connected groups emerged: the Zaporozhian Sich of the Dnieper and the Don Cossack Host. The Zaporozhian Sich were vassal people of Poland-Lithuania during feudal times. Under increasing social and religious pressure from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, in the mid-17th century the Sich declared an independent Cossack hetmanate, initiated by a rebellion under Bogdan Khmelnytsky. This uprising, which had been preceded by genocide, enslavement, and major depredation of the Ukrainian population, culminated in purging and pogroms against Polish and Jewish communities. Afterwards, the Treaty of Pereyaslav brought most of the Ukrainian Cossack state under Russian rule. The Sich with its lands became an autonomous region under the Russian-Polish protectorate. The Don Cossack Host, which had been established by the 16th century, allied with the Tsardom of Russia. Together they began a systematic conquest and colonization of lands in order to secure the borders on the Volga, the whole of Siberia, and the Yaik and the Terek rivers. Cossack communities had developed along the latter two rivers well before the arrival of the Don Cossacks. By the 18th century, Cossack hosts in the Russian Empire occupied effective buffer zones on its borders. The expansionist ambitions of the empire relied on ensuring the loyalty of Cossacks, which caused tension given the traditional exercise of freedom, democratic self-rule, and independence. Cossacks such as Stenka Razin, Kondraty Bulavin, Ivan Mazepa, and Yemlian Pugachev led major anti-imperial wars and revolutions in the empire in order to abolish slavery and odious bureaucracy and to maintain independence. The empire responded by ruthless executions and tortures. The destruction of the western part of the Don Cossack Host during the Bulavin Rebellion in 1707 to 1708. The destruction of Batran after Mazepa's rebellion in 1708, and the formal dissolution of the Lower Dnieper Zaporozhian Host in 1775, after Pugachev's rebellion. By the end of the 18th century, Cossack nations had been transformed into a special military state, a military class, similar to the knights of medieval Europe in feudal times of the tribal Roman auxiliaries. The Cossacks came to military service having to obtain charger horses, arms, and supplies at their own expense. The government provided only firearms and supplies for them. Cossack service was considered the most rigorous one. Because of the military tradition, Cossack forces played an important role in Russia's wars of the 18th–20th centuries, such as the Great Northern War, the 7 Years' War, the Crimean War, Napoleonic Wars, Caucasus War, numerous Russo-Persian Wars, numerous Russo-Turkish Wars, and the First World War. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Tsarist regime used Cossacks extensively to perform police service. They also served as border guards on national and internal ethnic borders. During the Russian Civil War, Don and Cuban Cossacks were the first nations to declare open war against the Bolsheviks. By 1918, Cossacks declared the complete independence of the nations and formed the independent states, the Ukrainian state, the Don Republic, and the Cuban People's Republic. The Cossack troops formed the effective core of the anti-Bolshevik White Army, and Cossack republics became centers for the anti-Bolshevik White movement. With the victory of the Red Army, the Cossack lands were subjected to de-Cossacization. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Cossacks made a systematic return to Russia. Many took an active part in post-Soviet conflicts and Yugoslav wars. In Russia's 2010 population census, Cossacks have been recognized as an ethnicity. There are Cossack organizations in Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Poland, and the United States. Etymology. Max Vesmer's etymological dictionary traces the name to the Old East Slavic word Kozak, a loanword from Cuman, in which Cossack meant free man. The ethnonym Kazakh is from the same Turkic root. In written sources the name is first attested in Codex Cumanicus from the 13th century. In English, Cossack is first attested in 1590. Early history. It is not clear when New Slavic people apart from Brodnichi and Berladniki started settling in the lower reaches of major rivers such as the Don and the Dnieper after the demise of the Khazar state. It is unlikely it could have happened before the 13th century, when the Mongols broke the power of the Cumans, who had assimilated the previous population on the territory. It is known that new settlers inherited a lifestyle that persisted long before, such as those of the Turkic Cumans and the Circassian Cossacks. However, Slavic settlements in southern Ukraine started to appear relatively early during the Cuman rule, with the earliest ones, like Oleshki, dating back to the 11th century. Early proto-Cossack groups are generally reported to have come into existence within the present-day Ukraine in the mid-13th century as the influence of Cumans grew weak, though some have ascribed their origins to as early as the 10th century. Some historians suggest that the Cossack people were of mixed ethnic origins, descending from Russians, Ukrainians, Moldavians, Poles, Turks, Tatars, and others who settled or passed through the vast steppe. However, some Turkologists argue that Cossacks are descendants of native Cumans of Ukraine, who lived there long ago before the Mongol invasion. In the midst of the growing Moscow and Lithuanian powers, new political entities had appeared in the region such as Moldavia and the Crimean Khanate. In 1261 some Slavic people living in the area between the Dniester and the Volga were mentioned in Ruthenian chronicles. Historical records of the Cossacks before the 16th century are scant as the history of the Ukrainian lands in that period for various reasons. As early as the 15th century, a few individuals ventured into the proverbial wild fields, the southern frontier regions of Ukraine separating Poland-Lithuania from the Crimean Khanate, which was a naturally rich and fertile region teeming with cattle, wild animals, and fish. These ventures went on short-term expeditions to acquire the region's natural wealth and this mode of existing, farming, hunting, then returning home in the winter or perhaps remaining permanently, came to be known as the Cossack way of life. In the 15th century, the Cossack society was described as a loose federation of independent communities, are often forming local armies, entirely independent from the neighboring states. According to Rushevsky, the first mention of Cossacks could be found already in the 14th century. However, they were either of Turkic or of undefined origin. Rushevsky states that Cossacks could have descended from the long-forgotten Antes or groups from the Berlad territory in present-day Romania, then a part of the Grand Duchy of Halych-Brodniki. Their Cossacks may have served as self-defense formations organized to defend against raids conducted by neighbors. By 1492, the Crimean Khan complained that Kanavan Cherkasy Cossacks attacked his ship near Tyana, and the Grand Duke of Lithuania Alexander I promised to find the guilty among the Cossacks. Sometime in the 16th century there appeared the old Ukrainian ballad of Cossack Host about a Cossack near Ilya. By the 16th century these Cossack societies merged into two independent territorial organizations as well as other smaller, still detached groups. The Cossacks of Zaporozhian Sich centered on the lower bends of Dnieper, inside the territory of modern Ukraine, with the fortified capital of Zaporozhian Sich. They were formally recognized as an independent state, the Zaporozhian Host, by a treaty with Poland in 1649. The Don Cossack state, on the river Don. The capital of the Don Cossack state was initially Razdory, then moved to Cherkassk, later moved to Novokakassk. In addition to these two, one finds mention of the less well-known Tatar Cossacks such as Nagai Bakla and Moshera Cossacks, of whom Sari Asman was the first Don Atman, and which not only were assimilated by Don Cossacks, but had their own irregular Bashkir and Moshera Host up to the end of the 19th century. Karmik and Buryut Cossacks should be mentioned as well. The Gypsy Cossacks are the least known ones now. Zaporozhian Cossacks. The Zaporozhian Cossacks, who lived on the Pontic-Caspian steppe below the Dnieper Rapids, became a well-known group. Cossack numbers increased greatly between the 15th and 17th centuries. Cossacks were usually organized by Ruthenian boyars or princes of the nobility, especially various Lithuanian starostas, merchants, peasants and runaways from the Poland-Lithuania Commonwealth, Moscow State, and modern Moldova and Romania also joined the Cossacks. The first recorded Zaporozhian Host prototype was formed when the cousin of Ivan the Terrible, Dmytro Vishnevitsky, built a fortress on the island of Little Khortytsia on the banks of the lower Dnieper in 1552. The Zaporozhian Host adopted a lifestyle that combined the ancient Cossack order and habits with that of the Knights Hospitaller. The Zaporozhian Cossacks played an important role in European geopolitics, participating in a series of conflicts and alliances with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire. As a result of the Khmelnytsky uprising in the middle of the 17th century, the Zaporozhian Cossacks briefly established an independent state, which later became the autonomous Cossack Hetmanate. It was a suzerainty under protection of the Russian Tsar from 1667 but ruled by the local hetmans for a century. The Zaporozhian Sich had its own authorities, its own nizovy, Zaporozhsky Host, and its own land. In the later half of the 18th century, Russian authorities destroyed this Zaporozhian Host and gave its lands to landlords. Some Cossacks moved to the Danube Delta region, where they formed the Danubian Sich under Ottoman rule. To prevent further defection of Cossacks, the Russian government restored the special Cossack status of the majority of Zaporozhian Cossacks. This allowed them to unite in the host of loyal Zaporozhians, and later reorganize into other hosts, of which the Black Sea Host was most important. They eventually moved to the Kuban region, due to the distribution of Zaporozhian Sich lands among landlords, and the resulting scarcity of land. The majority of Danubian Sich Cossacks had moved first to the Azov region in 1828, and later joined other former Zaporozhian Cossacks in the Kuban region. Groups were generally identified by faith rather than language in that period, and most descendants of Zaporozhian Cossacks in the Kuban region are bilingual, speaking both Russian and the local Kuban dialect of Central Ukrainian. The folklore is largely Ukrainian. While, in recent times, the Ukrainian linguistic and cultural impact has been attributed to Ukrainophile interests, the predominant view of ethnologists and historians is considered to be found in the common culture dating back to the Black Sea Cossacks. The Zaporozhians gained a reputation for the raids against the Ottoman Empire and its vassals, although they sometimes plundered other neighbors as well. Their actions increased tension along the southern border of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Low-level warfare took place in those territories for most of the period of the Commonwealth. In 1539, the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent asked Grand Duke Vasily III of Russia to restrain the Cossacks. The Duke replied, "The Cossacks do not swear allegiance to me, and they live as they themselves please." Quote, in 1549, Tsar Ivan the Terrible replied to the Suleiman's request that he stop the attacks by the Don Cossacks, saying, "The Cossacks of the Don are not my subjects, and they go to war or live in peace without my knowledge." The major powers tried to exploit Cossack warmongering for their own purposes. In the 16th century, with the power of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth extending south, the Zaporozhian Cossacks were mostly, if tentatively, regarded by the Commonwealth as the subjects. Registered Cossacks formed a part of the Commonwealth Army until 1699. Around the end of the 16th century, relations between the Commonwealth and the Ottoman Empire were strained by increasing Cossack aggression. From the second part of the 16th century, Cossacks started raiding Ottoman territories. The Polish government could not control the Cossacks, but was held responsible as the men were nominally the subjects. In retaliation, Tatars living under Ottoman rule launched raids into the Commonwealth, mostly in the southeast territories. In retaliation, Cossack pirates started raiding wealthy trading port cities in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, as these were just 2 days away by boat from the mouth of the Dnieper River. By 1615 and 1625, Cossacks had razed suburbs of Constantinople, forcing the Ottoman Sultan to flee his palace. Consecutive treaties between the Ottoman Empire and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth called for the governments to keep the Cossacks and Tatars in check, but neither enforced the treaties strongly. The Polish forced the Cossacks to burn the boats and stop raiding by sea, but they did not give it up entirely. During this time, the Habsburg Empire sometimes covertly hired Cossack raiders to go against the Ottomans to ease pressure on their own borders. Many Cossacks and Tatars developed long-standing enmity due to the losses of the raids. The ensuing chaos and cycles of retaliation often turned the entire southeastern Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth border into a low-intensity war zone. It catalyzed escalation of Commonwealth-Ottoman warfare, for the Moldavian Magnate Wars to the Battle of Skora and campaigns in the Polish-Ottoman War of 1633 to 1634. Cossack numbers expanded when the warriors were joined by peasants escaping serfdom in Russia and dependence in the Commonwealth. Attempts by the Shalokta to turn the Zaporozhian Cossacks into peasants eroded the Cossacks' formerly strong loyalty towards the Commonwealth. The government constantly rebuffed Cossack ambitions for recognition as equal to the Shalokta, and plans for transforming the Polish-Lithuanian two-nation Commonwealth into a Polish-Lithuanian Rus Commonwealth made little progress due to the idea's unpopularity among the Rus Shalokta of the Rus Cossacks being equal to Rus Shalokta. The Cossacks' strong historical allegiance to the Eastern Orthodox Church also put them at odds with officials of the Roman Catholic-dominated Commonwealth. Tensions increased when Commonwealth policies turned from relative tolerance to suppression of the Eastern Orthodox Church after the Union of Brest. The Cossacks became strongly anti-Roman Catholic, in this case an attitude that became synonymous with anti-Polish. Registered Cossacks. The waning loyalty of the Cossacks and the Szlachta's arrogance towards them resulted in several Cossack uprisings against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the early 17th century. Finally, the king's adamant refusal to cede to the Cossacks' demand to expand the Cossack registry was the last straw that prompted the largest and most successful of these, the Khmelnytsky uprising that started in 1648. Some Cossacks, including Polish Szlachta, converted to Eastern Orthodox, divided the lands of Ruthenian Szlachta in Ukraine, and became the Cossack Szlachta. The uprising became one of a series of catastrophic events for the Commonwealth known as the Deluge, which greatly weakened the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and set the stage for its disintegration 100 years later. The influential relatives of Russian and Lithuanian Szlachta in Moscow helped to create the Russian-Polish alliance against Khmelnytsky's Cossacks, as rebels against any order and the private property of Ruthenian Orthodox Szlachta. Don Cossack raids on Crimea, leaving Khmelnytsky without the aid of his usual Tatar allies. But in Russian opinion, the rebellion ended with the 1654 Treaty of Pereyaslav, in which Khmelnytsky's Cossacks, so that to destroy the Russian-Polish alliance against them, pledged their loyalty to the Russian Tsar, with the latter guaranteeing Cossacks his protection, recognition of Cossack starshina and the property and autonomy under his rule, freeing the Cossacks from the Polish sphere of influence and land claims of Ruthenian Szlachta. Only some part of the Ruthenian Szlachta of the Chernigov region, being of the Moscow state origin, saved the lands from division among Cossacks and became the part of the Cossack Szlachta. After this, Ruthenian Szlachta refrained from its plans to have a Moscow Tsar, the king of the Commonwealth. Its own Mitchell Korybat Wisniawitsky became the king later. The last, ultimately unsuccessful, attempt to rebuild the Polish-Cossack alliance and create a Polish-Lithuanian-Ruthenian Commonwealth was the 1658 Treaty of Hadyk, which was approved by the Polish king and Sejm as well as by some of the Cossack starshina, including Hetman Ivan Vyhovsky. The starshina were, however, divided on the issue, and the treaty had even less support among rank-and-file Cossacks, thus it failed. Under Russian rule, the Cossack nation of the Zaporozhian Host was divided into two autonomous republics of the Moscow Tsardom, the Cossack Hetmanate, and the more independent Zaporozhia. These organizations gradually lost their autonomy, and were abolished by Catherine II by the late 18th century. The Hetmanate became the governorship of Little Russia, and Zaporozhia was absorbed into New Russia. In 1775 the lower Dnieper Zaporozhian Host was destroyed. Later, its high-ranking Cossack leaders were exiled to Siberia, the last chief becoming the prisoner of the Solovetsky Islands, for the establishment of a new Sich in the Ottoman Empire by the part of Cossacks without any involvement of the punished Cossack leaders. Black Sea Azov and Danubian Sich Cossacks. With the destruction of the Zaporozhian Sich, many Zaporozhian Cossacks, especially the vast majority of old believers and other people from the Greater Russia, defected to Turkey and settled in the area of the Danube River, founding a new Sich there. Part of these Cossacks settled on Tisa River in Austrian Empire to have a new Sich there as well. Some Ukrainian-speaking Eastern Orthodox Cossacks, however, ran away across the Danube together with Cossacks of the Greater Russia origin to form a new host before rejoining the others in the Kuban and a lot of Ukrainian peasants and adventurers joined the Danubian Sich afterwards. Ukrainian folklore remembers the Danubian Sich, while new sieges of loyal Zaporozhians on Bug and Dniester are not famous ones. The majority of Tisa Sich and Danubian Sich Cossacks returned to Russia in 1828 and settled in the area north of the Azov and became known as the Azov Cossacks. But the majority of Zaporozhian Cossacks, especially Ukrainian-speaking Eastern Orthodox, remained loyal to Russia in spite of the Sich destruction and became known as the Black Sea Cossacks. Both Azov and Black Sea Cossacks were resettled to colonize the Cuban steppe, which was a crucial foothold for Russian expansion in the Caucasus. During Cossacks' stay in Turkey, a new host was founded which by the end of 1778 numbered around 12,000 Cossacks. The settlement at the border with Russia was approved by the Ottoman Empire after the Cossacks officially vowed to serve the Sultan. Yet the conflict inside the new host of the new loyalty, and the political maneuvers used by the Russian Empire, led to splits in the Cossacks. After a portion of the runaway Cossacks returned to Russia, they were used by the Russian army to form new military bodies that also incorporated Greek Albanians, Crimean Tatars and Gypsies. However, after the Russo-Turkish War of 1787 to 1792, most of them were incorporated into the Black Sea Cossack Host together with loyal Zaporozhians. The Black Sea Host moved to the Cuban steppes. Most of the remaining Cossacks that stayed in the Danube Delta returned to Russia in 1828 and created the Azov Cossack Host between Berdyansk and Mariupol. In 1860, all of them were resettled to the North Caucasus and merged into the Cuban Cossack Host.